Is it? I'm back with the latest after ITV News at 10. Coming up, Mary with the ITV Evening News, but from all of us on the London team, bye-bye. Britain's broken housing. Tonight, the neglected estate that's home to hundreds of families. Many buildings at Eastfields Estate in South London have had no maintenance in 30 years, leaving them rat-infested and dangerous.
Imagine having your child sitting there under a roof and it just dropped. And my children, the little one came, "Mummy, the roof has come down."
Well, we spent 2 weeks at Eastfields seeing the terrible conditions there for ourselves. Well, tonight we confront the Housing Association in charge. Also tonight, the compulsory COVID jabs for care home workers to help protect residents. But do homes risk losing staff? Post-lockdown price rises, inflation's at its highest for 2 years as people start spending again. Could Wales be heading for a win at the Euros? The latest on a big night in Baku.
This is the ITV Evening News with Mary Nightingale.
Good evening. For decades, people living on the Eastfields estate in South London have complained of living in damp, leaky and rat-infested homes. Residents claim repeated demands for repairs fall on deaf ears. Over 2 weeks, ITV News witnessed firsthand the conditions that many people have to put up with there. That is despite their homes being owned by the UK's largest housing association, tasked with providing safe and affordable accommodation, often to society's most vulnerable. Well, that company, Clarion, has now apologised, but only after being confronted by our correspondent Daniel Hewitt in the latest of his reports on Britain's housing shame.
For almost 50 years, families of this South London suburb have called the Eastfields estate their home. But time has not been kind. And inside these three-storey blocks, owned and managed by Britain's biggest housing association, their tenants feel as tired and neglected as the crumbling buildings they're forced to live in. Mum of three, Juliet Arthur, and her husband work 3 jobs between them to afford the £1,300 a month Clarion housing charge to live in this.
This is where the hole is.
Oh, wow.
That's how they left it.
A leak in her living room she first reported in June 2020 went unfixed, so in November the ceiling caved in, inches from where her son was doing schoolwork.
Imagine having your child sitting there under a roof and it just dropped. And my children, the little one came, "Mummy, the roof has come down."
Do you worry about their safety when you're not here?
Every day.
7 months on, the hole remains, and the leak has plunged the house into darkness. None of the lights upstairs have worked since November, including the children's bedroom.
My mum keep on calling them, and they're not like messaging or calling, saying, we're going to be coming. Yeah.
No, they don't.
No.
On the other side of the estate, Janet is working 2 jobs to pay for a Clarion flat that is falling apart. She shows us the squalor that is her rotting, broken bathroom, and the kitchen where she cooks for her family, crumbling around her. The ceiling's covered in mould, the walls are full of holes. She's had to fill in herself to keep out a growing infestation of mice.
And the mouse come from this hole.
What, the mouse come through here?
Yeah.
So is this cement?
Yeah, it's a cement.
Did you do this?
Yeah, I do it.
What is that?
It's a hole.
Why is there a hole there?
I don't know. When I come, it was here.
So it's been like that for 27 years?
Yes.
Have you told them about the problems in here?
I told them. So they don't care. They don't care.
Janet isn't the only tenant to report a rodent problem to Clarion. Eastfields residents shared with us video after video of mice and rats in their kitchens, their bedrooms and their bathrooms. Clarion has promised to regenerate this estate and move tenants into new properties, but the dozens of tenants we spoke to in the 2 weeks we spent here say that promise was first made 6 years ago and still no one has been moved. Why have so many Clarion tenants been left to live in Eastfields in such squalor for so many years?
Getting the balance right between how much you spend in the short and the long term on an estate that ultimately has come to the end of its life is difficult. I'm absolutely clear that we have not got the balance right on the Eastfields estate, and I'd like to apologise on behalf of Clarion to all of those residents.
Tenants think that you think they aren't important. They complain for years and nothing really gets fixed. Then we turn up and suddenly things start to get fixed. And they look at that and they think, oh no, we were right, we don't matter to them. They're right, aren't they?
I and the senior management team are completely committed to putting in extra resources on this estate to get this right.
These homes may have reached the end of their life, but their replacements haven't even started being built. In the meantime, residents fear their suffering will continue to be met with silence.
I mean, where even to begin with this? Clarion are one of Britain's biggest housing associations. How has it got to this?
Yeah, they are the biggest. Like council housing, Clarion provide cheaper rented accommodation, often to people on lower incomes. But unlike councils, who've had their budgets slashed over the last 10 years, making it much harder for them to maintain their housing stock, Clarion, like many housing associations, is a big business. Their income has been rising. They turned over £940 million this year. Their CEO took home over £400,000 this year, almost treble what the Prime Minister earned. So clearly this is not a money issue, and Clarion have basically admitted that, which points to a sort of different answer. And what the tenants feel is they feel neglected. Clarion don't want to spend money on that estate, but they have to live in that estate potentially for many more years, and they can't leave because they can't afford private market rent. So they just feel trapped.
Truly terrible. Daniel, thank you. Now, COVID vaccines are to be made compulsory for all care home workers in England in a move the government says will protect residents. But some care providers are really concerned that it could lead to staff shortages if those staff refuse to cooperate. Less than 60% are fully vaccinated in some areas. Here's our health editor, Emily Morgan.
The residents at St Celia's do not have fond memories of the past year. COVID ripped through their care home last April and many lost friends. All of them have now been vaccinated, along with nearly all of the staff here. But forcing those who haven't is not something the owner wants to do.
In any one day, there's been 120,000 vacancies. We want to welcome people in social care. We don't want a barrier about the vaccination issue. But I'm also worried about the fact that the staff we've already got, if they refuse, the government's saying if you can't redeploy them, they might have to lose their job. And I don't think that's the right approach.
In England, there are more than 473,000 staff working in older adult care eligible for the vaccine. But as of the 10th of June, nationally, nearly 77,000 hadn't had one dose yet. That's 16% of staff. It's why the government's decided to take a tough approach.
The vast majority of staff in care homes are already vaccinated, but not all. And we know that the vaccine not only protects you, but protects those around you. And therefore, we will be taking forward the measures to ensure the mandation as a condition of deployment for staff in care homes.
A consultation on whether both COVID and flu vaccines should be compulsory for all NHS workers will now take place. It's a move the government may need to make.
Care home staff might feel that they've been unfairly picked on or unfairly singled out because there seem to be lots of other staff or lots of other people in the health and care sector who deal with patients with certain vulnerabilities who can't easily avoid the risk of COVID-19 exposure.
Staff in care homes will have 16 weeks to comply with the new law. It is an unprecedented move, but for the government, a necessary one. Emily Morgan, ITV News.
Now, Downing Street insists the Prime Minister has full confidence in his Health Secretary, despite the release of messages supposedly from the PM in which he twice describes Matt Hancock as hopeless. Now, the messages sent in March last year apparently were published by Boris Johnson's former chief advisor, Dominic Cummings, and our political reporter, Shihab Khan, is in Downing Street. Look, this is embarrassing and awkward, isn't it? But how damaging could it be?
Well, it certainly adds pressure and puts pressure on the Prime Minister. It is the latest salvo in what has been a bitter war of words between the former chief advisor to the Prime Minister and both the Prime Minister and the Health Secretary. He's now published, as you say, WhatsApp conversations that he says he had with the Prime Minister at the start of the pandemic. Now, some of the language used can't be repeated, but in March, Dominic Cummings messaged the Prime Minister to say Matt Hancock was sceptical about reaching his earlier promise of getting to 10,000 tests per day. The Prime Minister replied, he is totally useless. Similarly, on the same day, while talking about ventilators, Dominic Cummings says they've totally messed up, and the Prime Minister replied, it's Hancock. He has been hopeless. There are other conversations in there as well where they're talking about the situation with PPE, when it appears the Prime Minister suggests that he may take the responsibility away from Matt Hancock and give it to Michael Gove. Now, Downing Street wouldn't respond to those allegations specifically. What they did say is that the Prime Minister's official spokesperson said that Boris Johnson has full confidence in Matt Hancock. He also hasn't given a direct response, but sources close to him tell me that they feel as though when they gave evidence to MPs a couple of weeks ago for 4 hours, that they responded to these claims, and a lot of it remains unsubstantiated.
OK, Shihab Khan in Downing Street, thank you. Well, there was some good news on COVID treatments today. An antiviral drug has been shown to reduce the risk of death in hospital patients with severe cases of COVID. Regeneron was tested as part of the recovery trial. It stimulates antibody production in those who don't have a response of their own. Russia's Vladimir Putin says his meeting with the US President Joe Biden was constructive. During candid talks that were shorter than expected, the pair discussed human rights in Russia and aggression by Moscow. From the summit in Geneva, here's our Europe editor, James Mates.
At these carefully choreographed summits, there are few victories, but the Americans did score one today by insisting Vladimir Putin's motorcade arrive first. So for the first time in anyone's memory, Vladimir Putin, the man who once kept the Pope waiting an hour, turned up on time. For President Biden, whose idea this summit was, no expectation of a breakthrough, but a chance he hopes to stabilise US-Russian relations after a long period in which they've been getting dangerously worse. On the doorsteps of the Villa Lagrange on the shores of Lake Geneva, there was no sign of either warmth or friendship between the two men. After all, Biden has publicly called Putin a killer. Putin dismissed him as trying to be macho. The body language didn't improve much inside, with minimum eye contact and non-committal statements to the world's media.
Try to determine where we have mutual interests, that we can cooperate, and where we don't, establish a predictable and rational way in which we disagree.
There were 2 sessions of talks rather than 3 that lasted for a little over 3 hours rather than the predicted 5. But did that mean they'd not gone well? Or were the ambitions here so limited it all got wrapped up quickly? As Joe Biden left Villa Lagrange, he flashed a smile and a thumbs up while Putin went straight to a press conference. Despite a lack of anything concrete beyond an agreement to allow each other's ambassadors back into their embassies, he was upbeat.
This was a productive meeting. It was fruitful, it was to the point, and it took place in an atmosphere that was actually enabling.
Biden will talk shortly, and that may reveal more. But the impression here is of a big build-up, much diplomacy, but little substantive to show for it. James Mates, ITV News, Geneva.
Still to come in the ITV News, the rising cost of haircuts. But what is pushing up prices? And the wing walker who will not be beaten by age. Those stories and more after the break. Join me then. Again, welcome back. The cost of living is on the rise again. Last month, prices increased at the fastest rate for 2 years. Now, according to official figures out today, the main measure of inflation hit 2.1% in May. Increasing fuel prices were the biggest contributor, up almost 18%. On the high street, the cost of clothes was also up, and so too the price of many services, as Rebecca Barry reports.
Perfect, it's not too bright. No.
It was the first thing many people booked as they emerged from lockdown, a much-needed haircut. But a trim and blow-dry here at Ruby Reds in Reading will now cost you £3 more than it did last year. Just one of the price rises that's helped push UK inflation to a 2-year high.
The reason we've had to do the 5% increase is generally down to the PPE. All of the screens that we've had to purchase, we're not just talking a couple of hundred, we're talking thousands.
Driven by the rising cost of fuel and clothing, the Consumer Prices Index shot up to 2.1% last month. That's above the Bank of England's 2% target and way above what analysts had expected. Justina is a healthcare assistant at a hospital.
Everything little by little is going up, and then again you don't have that spare money left to enjoy your life, if you like.
Taxi driver Ali says it's tough.
After the last year pandemic, the prices of everything's up, but the salary and the people's earning is going low. It is very hard at the moment for everyone.
When restrictions relaxed, many of us were keen to get out and get spending, but supply has struggled to keep up with a global shortage of some goods because of COVID-related disruption. All that's pushed up prices, but what will be the impact?
We might see interest rates start to go up as a way of controlling people's borrowing and making sure people don't take on a lot of debt at this time, and that sort of process will help to make any economic recovery a bit steadier, kind of levelling the economic bump, if you like, and bringing things under control.
But when every penny counts, rising prices are the last thing struggling households need right now. Rebecca Barry, ITV News, Reading.
The Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Dame Cressida Dick, has said she will not resign and does not believe her force is corrupt. The Met were accused of institutional corruption by an independent panel looking into the death of the murdered private investigator Daniel Morgan. Speaking today, Cressida Dick denied obstructing the work of the panel. And the inquest verdict into a teenager from London who died in Malaysia has been overturned. 15-year-old Nora Quarrin's body was found in the jungle 2 years ago. The original inquest found she died from misadventure, but today a judge changed that to an open verdict. At Euro 2020, Wales are currently playing Turkey in a crucial game. After a draw at the weekend, a win today would be enough to secure Wales a place in the knockout stages. From Baku, Lucy Watson reports.
Italy, a little less with a little less pressure.
OK, Lucy Watson in Baku. And finally, the great-grandmother who has taken to the skies after beating breast cancer. 90-year-old Lynn Mitchell today became one of the oldest ever wing walkers over her home county of Gloucestershire. Her 14 grandchildren and great-grandchildren cheering her on from the ground. Lynn was raising money for Macmillan Cancer Support. And that is all for now. Tom's here with news at 10:20, and that is after the football. But from me and all the team for now, bye-bye.